And I want to take a second and talk about fatherhood in America. But before so, I want to talk about a story in the Bible, in Judges. There were two women that went to and stood before Solomon. And the one woman sat there at the courthouse and she was crying. And she said, listen, this woman, she said she stole my baby. And Solomon asked her to explain. He said, well, our babies are 3 days apart. We were staying in the same house, different rooms in the same house. And this woman rolled over and she killed her child. She slept over and she killed the child. And she said, and then she got up in the middle of the night with a dead child and switched the two babies and put her baby where my baby was and took my child. She said, I woke up in the morning and I started screaming because I thought my child was dead, only to realize that is not my child. She said, so I went to tell her, this is not my child, give me back my baby. She wouldn't allow it. The other woman started saying, hey, she's lying, that's my child. And so Solomon said, okay. He grabbed one of the soldiers. He said, soldier, do me a favor, come on over here. I want you to grab your sword and I want you to cut this baby in half. And so as he was ready to lift his arm to cut the baby in half, one mother started screaming and said, forget it, forget it, forget it. Just give her the baby. Don't cut the baby in half. And the other mother said, no, go ahead and cut the baby in half. That way none of us will get this child. I'm going to repeat what she said. She said, go ahead and cut the baby in half. That way none of us will get this child. Solomon was shocked by the narcissism and what was going on with this woman. And so he said, you know what? Then that mother is the real mother. At the time, Israel was similar to about half the distance of America, so I would imagine it could fit easily 100 million people in it. The news, what he decided in that, when giving her the child, the news went out so far, all over the country, and the country said, the nation said, he must walk with God. Why? Because they were used to not putting the children first. They were used to not making it about the baby. That was the culture, which is not much different today. There is a disgusting culture that is so anti the fathers and is so unbiblical, is so unrighteous. 90%. In the past few days, I sat out here and talked to the homeless kids between 13 and 26 and looked at the Baltimore Sun and the statistics in this area and throughout the nation. 90% of the kids and the people that are homeless come from fatherless households. They were disconnected from their fathers. In terms of education, I just want you to understand how huge and how important a relationship is with your father. The families from Africa, Africans teach that one father is equal to 100 teachers. Africans teach that one father is equal to 100 teachers. So what has that meant for them in their lives? In India, the net worth for the average family that comes to America and they keep their unit together, their net worth is twice that of white America, over 500,000. The Asians, twice as much of white America. The Nigerians and the Africans have more PhDs than all the racial groups, including the Asians. And the number one response when they asked each one of the children about their academic excellence, and they asked each one of the children about how well are you doing, their number one response was the same from India, from Asia, and from Africa. The children said on average, my father would have it no other way. There is an attack all throughout the nation on fathers. United States Census has said this is a crisis. CDC has said it's a crisis. Mental health professionals all over the country said this attack on fathers is a crisis. 82% of the women, when surveyed, and they sat and they asked them, 82% in the religious community asked them, when did the disconnect start between the child and the father? And they asked them, 82% said it started with me. The disconnect between the children and the father started with me. There was a malicious culture that is perpetuated by the churches and the courthouses against the fathers. It is so dangerous for the children. Fathers that are disconnected from their children are 8 times more likely to commit suicide. The children, before they 10, are 13 times more likely to be diagnosed with a mental illness by being disconnected from their fathers. Wisconsin, Wisconsin, for every 1,000 people, they're averaging 4 violent crimes. For every 1,000 people, Wisconsin is averaging 4 violent crimes. In Massachusetts, it's 4 times more than that. In Maryland, it's 38 people that are violated through violent crimes per 1,000. That's 10 times more people that are violated through violent crimes in Maryland. In Baltimore, it's 64 people per 1,000. You do the math on what 64 divided by 4 is. That's insane. And they said the number one reason is because these boys and these little girls are being disconnected from their fathers. There are 90 million Americans that are registered with some sort of mental illness. And they did a study to figure out what was the commonality of all of these babies, all of these people in America that grew up to be adults and having issues of keeping jobs and keeping relationships. And they asked, the number one research was the disconnect between the child, the individual, and their father. There is an abuse that we have towards the men and these children. More importantly, the children are suffering greatly. They're losing it. Their suicide rate is 16 times more higher when they're disconnected from their fathers. They're 4 times more likely to be in poverty. There are 90% of all millionaires are married. 90%, over 95% of all billionaires are married, but 90% of the poor people are single. Ecclesiastes tell us that 2 are better than 1 because they get a better return on their work. So even if a parent, they even did this study, even if a biological father and a biological mother is not married, but they have a plan to co-parent the child. If they have a plan to co-parent the child, that child is 2 times more successful than everybody else in every area. This is why I respect Wisconsin. Wisconsin has a law that states this: if you want a divorce, go ahead and get a divorce. But we will not grant the divorce until you have a plan for the child first. Not until we have a plan for the child, we'll grant the divorce. Both of you need to work, right? We're not taking advantage of each other. We're not taking advantage of the system, right? Why is that a problem? We got 54 million Americans on welfare. 10 times more. Now, if anybody was in their late 40s and early 50s, it was 10 times less people when we were younger that was on welfare than now. The number one reason, the boys is a pipeline to prison, and for the girls it's a walkway for welfare. Begging for other people. And it's not helping just because you get a degree. 33,000 people filed for food stamps last year that has a PhD. 296,000 master's degrees filed for food stamps last year. Over 3 million bachelor's degrees filed for food stamps last year with their degrees. The number one connection, fatherlessness. 7 out of 10 of the kids that get academic scholarships, the father was an active role. 95% of all dropouts in school, the father was not around. God is not playing about this attitude that we have towards the men and these children. Luke 17:2. Luke 17:2 tells us, it is better for you to tie a rope. This is to you judges and you preachers and this community that's okay with watching people walk in with 3 and 4 kids and not ask, where's the children's father? No one's asking before you let them join the church or join your group, where is these babies' fathers? They said one of the number one questions when welfare system first started, when elderly women, our mentors, would see the children, they said statistically one of the first questions the elderly women would ask when they would see children is, where's these babies' daddy? Where them babies' daddies at? They cared so much because they knew what the role of the father is. They did neuroscientists and social scientists. They did a study on fathers and the connection to the child. The neuroscientists said that the brain didn't change for men and women much, but the social behavior patterns. Men, on average, 1/3 of their testosterone went away when there was a child. 1/3. I believe oxytocin, the ability to be more empathetic, almost doubled for most men. When they followed the patterns of nurturing for a child, listening for a child, the men surpassed the women. They said men, when they listen to the child they walk faster, they talk faster as a toddler because discovery is easier for their brain. They said the children whose fathers are active in their life have the highest emotional intelligence, so they often go into more leadership positions in politics, universities. They lead more people across the nation. Those without the connection between their father have the higher percentage of depression, Obesity 3 times higher. Teen pregnancy goes up 3 to 4 times higher. 92% of all drug dealers and all gangs has a disconnect with their fathers. This conversation that we're having about bringing down drugs and crime and ending homelessness, I'm gonna answer your question, make it real easy. Baltimore, right now, 31 days in Baltimore has had 27 murders. And people are coming to me asking, are you gonna march about this violence? Are you gonna come down and help us march? I say no, I'll help you march to find the fathers. Because it is pointless to be focusing on the byproduct and not the warehouse that is producing it. Frederick Douglass told us 190 years ago, that it is way easier to come together and to build and develop strong boys and girls. It's way easier than it is to repair broken men. Frederick Douglass said it's almost too late. You can do all the marching, you can do all of the yelling, and the Bible tells us, train a child when they're young in the way that they should go, so when they're old, ain't nothing you can do to stop them. Which means if you mistrain a child, if you don't give this child a connection to their father, when they're old, they ain't gonna depart from that either. Over 500,000 on the wait list for YMCA for mentors. 500,000 children. And they said, what do we do? What do we do to create, to be able to get more mentors, the people to come out of their houses and care for these kids? We got a solution. Find their fathers. Go get their fathers. Help to create bridges for the fathers. The school systems are sick in the way we handle the connection between the children and their father. And then they wonder why the children without the fathers are performing poorly. They said fathers that take their kids to school the first 30 days, the kids do 47% better in school because the father took them in the first 30 days. You got endless men doing surveys that are terrified of the idea of being married in America. America, let me just help y'all understand where we at. There's 8 billion people on the planet, 8 billion people on the cotton picking planet. America only makes up 4% of the planet's population. That's a teeny piece. Let me tell you how bad we are with this. We make up 4% of the planet, but America leads the world in broken homes and single parenting. The world. Well, how dark are we? What is going on with us? And we bring up every other thing. I'm telling you right now, if you want to be a mayor, you want to be a congressman, you want to be anything around these parts, if the agenda for the connection between fathers and children is not on the ticket, it's not part of the discussion, you ain't having a seat. I'm telling you, there are millions of men, thousands and thousands. We're going to start marching. I started meeting with multiple organizations. We're partnering together to make it clear. We're meeting in town hall meetings, and you're going to see this stuff. Stay tuned. We're not playing. We're coming for our babies. You're not going to just take them and do what you want. These kids are ravaging themselves. I'm going to give you a couple weird stories. Where we at with time, bro?
I got 13 minutes.
I want to give y'all a couple stories. One guy I know is a popular producer. If everybody knows his music, we know his song. We know this guy's stuff. He was dating a woman, and one day he was at the studio calling his friend, and he wouldn't pick up. And he said, listen, man, I can't wait. I got to get out of here. So he goes down to where his son's mother is. At the time, she was living somewhere different. He went down to go see her because they were dating, and to see his son. When he got there, the best friend was opening the door in his underwear. Now, everybody knew this guy as a vicious martial artist. He could have really did something to this guy. So instead, he told her, hey, listen, I just can't do this with you anymore. We can't work out. She said, if you leave me, does that sound like the same thing as the judges? Huh? If I don't get my way. She said, if you leave me, you will never see your son again. It was his firstborn child. He was 5. He broke. He said, Marcel, she wasn't lying. Last time I seen my son, when I saw my son again, he was 12 and he was in a casket. The little boy would call him for the next 7 years on payphone after payphone, trying to find his dad. And his dad started studying the Bible with him and certain little scriptures. And he, unbeknownst to his father, that the little boy started studying the scriptures and started preaching to all of these people. And so they said one of the most popular surgeons in the country started working on him, had this acute cancer that was mostly likely by something he was intaking or something that was given to him. And so they called the father and said, listen, your son's probably gonna die real soon, so you need to come down here. And he said, okay. He said, he said, when I saw my son, he was dead. He said there were people from all over, different races, different backgrounds, and they started talking about the son and how he impacted their life. The whole time that he was away from his son, the mom was sleeping with this preacher because her family wasn't for it, his family wasn't for it, and she was moving from city to city, jumping all around. We're going to talk about that more later. So she's moving all around, and so she starts sleeping with this preacher, who's married, by the way. So then, at the funeral, the preacher, guess who does the funeral? The preacher that's been sleeping with her because she had a victim story. Her victim story was real good. Victim narcissism is beyond toxic in this country. I think deadbeat dads and deadbeat men should be held accountable. But malicious mother syndrome is a major issue nationwide. Victim narcissism is a major issue, and there is nothing protecting these babies. There is nothing protecting the men that are designed and by God to protect these babies. So these babies and these men are vulnerable. There's a fear that is struck in the land because we are so far from God and understanding this. So the preacher at this so-called funeral begins to talk about, that's my son. The funeral went crazy. Got another story of a young guy who was talking about how he was in middle school and his mom was sleeping with another guy and had his 2 children in a room, and he would get up and he would be disgusted in middle school, and she would tell him, close your eyes and roll over. We got men upon men upon men. Sat into the courthouse right around the corner from here. I walked in there were 50 men in the hallway. One brother was an attorney. I said, oh, okay, you're an attorney? You must be representing anybody. He dropped his head. He said, no, I'm here for custody. Another guy I seen in scrubs. He said, what's going on? He said, well, what do you do? I asked him, what do you do? He said, I'm a nurse practitioner. I'm here for custody. And he says, it's nothing, it's not working. He presented all the data, so she's addiction, she's dealing with this. And the judge said, I'm not here for that. Handed the baby over effortlessly. The baby is crying and screaming. There is no focus on the needs of the children. Almost a third of the country is registered with some sort of mental illness. We have no regulations on making sure that people have the right kind of thinking or mindset before they even take these children. It's out of control. I can give you stat after stat. We have 4 years of court cases ready for the nation to hear. We want to hear how dark and sick this is, how it is not about these babies. It is not about these children. People are allowed to do whatever they want based on their emotions and not about the well-being. I want to give hats off to Wisconsin. 4 people are violent per every 1,000. I believe it's a direct correlation with their rules for divorce and marriage. They have one of the lowest divorce rates in the United States. Why? I believe when the anxiety goes away for both the men and the women and the children, that you can't just do what you want in relationships. People have to grow up and be more responsible. They have to take what they're doing more serious. But then you get to these liberal states where we do whatever we want. We don't honor any commitment that we have. And the number one people that are suffering, killing themselves, suicide, obesity, promiscuity, children, more brokenness. They doing out more. It's the children. It's the babies. I believe we got to change these laws. I dare you in 2020. I dare you. On behalf of millions of fathers, we dare you to try to run for office. Without these babies and the family, it's not the focus. Children should never be in the middle, but they should be at the center. They are the legacy. 70% of all wealth is lost on the first generation, 90% by the second. And it is more dominant in the households where the father has been removed. For us to become successful, we need the fathers.